Hey everyone, I'm back with another MacBook Pro gaming video, and this time we're going to take a look at viewer requests. Many of you have been leaving comments about games you want to see me test, so I've taken some of the most popular games that I could get a hold of, and I've tried them out. So today we're going to take a look at 4 of the most requested games. First up is Rise of the Tomb Raider. This game came out in November of 2015, and it's still a pretty graphically intensive game. So, I found the best performance in this game comes when I play it at 720p, so that's what I chose for this video. And for the graphics settings, the game recommended the lowest preset, so I just left it there. You can see that almost all the settings are either turned to low or they're turned right off. One quick note is that if you turn on exclusive full screen mode, you'll actually get a few extra frames per second. I couldn't do that for this video though because it didn't cooperate with my capture card. So, the game doesn't look too bad at the lowest preset. It's roughly console quality, maybe a little bit worse. And you can see the frame rate holding somewhere in the high 20s. It does occasionally get a little bit lower than that, but then in some other areas it also hits the high 40s. Overall, I'd say expect to be playing this game at about 30 frames per second on this computer, which isn't too bad, and it's completely playable, even some of the more action-heavy sequences.
Shit, Laura. You're gonna give me a heart attack. Are you okay?
Yeah. Come on.
Overall, the graphics quality isn't too bad, but I would like to point out a few things taking a look at the benchmark here. You'll notice both the high and low frame rates that I was talking about, but there's also a few graphical glitches that show up throughout the game that you'll see in this benchmark. The first is this lens flare coming up, and I'm not quite sure what causes this. It doesn't happen on my desktop computer, so I'm assuming it's something to do with the Iris graphics, but it happens even with lens flares turned off, so it's these weird rectangles all over the screen. I've also noticed various lighting bugs when I was playing through the game. They happen most often when you're moving from a light area to a dark area, but it usually fixes itself after a couple seconds. You can also see that weird lens flare effect showing up here again, although it's more subdued than it was outside in the snowy areas. This final area of the benchmark performs pretty well. You can see the frame rate stays in the high 30s for most of it, although there is some graphical pop-in at times. Right here you'll see a whole bunch of the props suddenly appear out of nowhere. This is a bit jarring when you're playing the game, but luckily it doesn't happen very often. It only seems to happen when you're moving quickly. Next up is City Skylines. This game got quite a few requests, and I was actually pretty excited to try it out since it wouldn't run at all on my old MacBook. I'm running this one at 1080p, and I'm running it under Windows 10. Now this game does have a Mac version available, but there's a good reason why I'm running it under Windows 10, and I'll explain a little bit later. So this is a brand new city, and you see we're sitting roughly around 30 frames per second. Despite the low frame rate, the tools do respond very well, and it's quite easy to play the game. Now, the reason I'm playing this under Windows 10 is that City Skylines doesn't actually support any of Intel's graphics chips. That wasn't much of a problem a few years ago, but with the release of the After Dark DLC, they actually upgraded the graphics engine. This caused a bunch of graphical glitches with Intel graphics cards, and this can only be fixed by turning on DirectX 9 mode under Windows. When we move to a little bit larger of a city, you can see the frame rate takes quite a dip. Our 30 frames per second is gone, and now we're seeing mid to low 20s, sometimes dropping into the teens. Now this is running at 1080p with most settings on low, so there's really not much wiggle room to improve performance. One thing I am going to do though is turn up some of the graphics settings and show you that it doesn't actually affect frame rate much at all. The only thing that really seems to change the frame rate drastically is dropping the resolution, which I'll do towards the end of the video. So we'll start by turning a few settings to medium and see how that affects our performance. You can see our frame rate is still in the mid-teens when we're zoomed in close like this, but we've actually got quite an increase in graphical quality. Now let's take a look at those same settings but running at 720p. You can see our frame rate's gone up probably close to 30 or 40%. Now we're in the high teens to low 20s when we're zoomed in close like this. And finally, 720p with everything turned pretty much as low as it'll go. The game feels quite smooth at these settings, but you can tell the graphics quality really suffers. But you do have options depending on whether you prefer frame rate or graphics quality. Another one of the most popular requests is Rocket League. Once again, we're running this game under Windows 10. Now this is a game that you really need to play at 60 frames per second. So I've chosen the best settings to achieve that, and they're actually quite high. The game looks really good running at 1080p, and we get a solid 60 frames per second. This is a standard 3-on-3 match, which is probably about what you'll see online when you're playing normally, and the frame rate feels really solid no matter what's going on the screen. Not much else to say about this one. It runs incredibly well on this MacBook Pro, and you can watch the footage and judge for yourself. And last but not least, we have Battlefield 1 running under Windows 10. This is probably the newest game I've tested on this computer since it just came out this past fall. I'm running this one at 720p, and to start off with, I'm going to take the recommended settings. The game actually recommended the medium preset, but I'm going to try it on low later to show you the difference. The graphics at medium though are pretty much exactly what you'd expect from a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox One. In a way, that's actually pretty impressive for a computer that doesn't even have a dedicated graphics card. So you can see our frame rate in some of these busier scenes is sitting somewhere around 25 frames per second. Sometimes it'll go down a little bit lower and sometimes it'll jump up a little bit higher, but generally when there's a lot going on screen, that's roughly where you'll see it. As we get to an area with less going on, you can see the frame rate starts to creep up a bit towards 30, and that's pretty much the same performance you get from any of the different campaign missions in the game. Now keep an eye on that frame rate counter. I'm going to change the graphics settings to the low preset to show you the difference it makes in the overall frame rate. In this exact same scene, we were getting about 28 frames per second before, but now we're seeing over 40. Even though we've got everything on low, the game still looks pretty good. Even better, since our frame rate jumped up so much, we do have some room to play with the settings and improve the graphics quality without losing too many frames per second. Overall, I'm happy to say that Battlefield 1 plays pretty good on this 13-inch MacBook Pro. You have a lot of room to choose whether you want a higher frame rate or better graphics, and no matter what you choose, the game is completely playable. So that was a look at some of the games that people were asking me to play on this MacBook Pro. I hope you enjoyed this, and keep the requests coming. I'll be doing more videos soon. Also stay tuned for some other content. I've got some great ideas for some things I think people might like. Thanks for watching.